She would remain quiet and docile, but of course she would speak her mind to them. Uchiha Dono, you must understand it's a difficult balance between your feelings on the matter and the duty to the village and your clan to continue. Makoto's glare, cut the elder off and let her have the floor again. I will decide how far my loyalty to the village goes, and I damn well know my duty to my clan. My daughter and I will most likely have children in our futures, however, it will be with someone we wish to have children with and not yours. Just as the elders were thinking of a smart retort, Danzo decided to make his presence known. Uchiha-san, you should know such a weak excuse will not allow you to escape a craw so easily. Makoto twisted in her seat to see Danzo shuffle in and look at her with a thinly opened eye, like a constant glare. Sympathy is not my strong point, so excuse me for not feeling too much about your past experience. Your past husband failed as a Konoha shinobi and as a lover, but that doesn't. Makoto had kicked over her chair as she stood up in pure outrage over his accusation. Danzo? What is the meaning of this? You were not to come. Sarutobi did not like his old comrade's entrance already and hoped to cut it short. I'm sorry Sarutobi, but I cannot allow this woman to jeopardize the future of a great bloodline because she allows her feelings to get in the way of the village's best interest. Now Uchiha-san, if you want to leave this meeting without even stricter restraints on your clan and your daughter, I highly suggest you give us a name for you and your daughter's future husband or husbands. If you do so, choose. Makoto flinched and realized he had backed her into a corner. It was true, Danzo and the elders could make the Uchiha have an even worse time in Konoha than they were now. Even worse, an accident could befall her, leaving her unable to care for Sasuke and Naruto and leave them for the Vulture Council. Danzo enjoyed seeing the woman deflate as she realized just what power he held. He only came because he knew the elders would fail in persuading her. The woman was stubborn and was thinking with her heart when she should think with her head. How can you expect me to have an answer to such a question so quickly? Makoto was at a loss for words. What was she to say in response to that? It was a life-changing decision who you would marry and have children with, definitely not one that could be made in a few moments. Danzo, your interruption has disrupted this meeting. I should adjourn it right now for your disrespect of this council and the Uchiha. But it is true that Makoto-san must make a decision. I need to speak with her in private for a moment. Hiruzen looked at his two teammates and inclined his neck toward the door. Elders, please excuse yourselves for a few minutes. Haru and Hamura were flabbergasted, too shocked to say anything in response as they slowly shuffled out. Danzo left a lingering glare before joining them in the hallway and closing the door behind them. Hiruzen sighed and waved a hand toward another chair that Makoto hadn't knocked down, but she refused to calm herself. Makoto. I know this is a troubling development, but I have to agree with Danzo. Making a premature decision can most definitely be life-changing for the both of you, but that doesn't mean you can't change your mind in the future. Your daughter still has many years before she is of age where this will be implemented. Hiruzen stood beside her, speaking encouragingly in her ear as she shook with rage. And there are ways for you to avoid the craw as well. Do you remember what I told you yesterday? Makoto thought back and couldn't believe he was having her consider the idea. It was disgusting. A younger man, Hokage-sama. How can you ask me to choose a boy where I am twice his age? How will he even take it knowing he is to breed with a total stranger? She said the word with disgust. I can't do that. Besides, I know no boy that would be young enough to keep me from having love with him for more than a few years. Hiruzen sighed. He had already thought of a suggestion. No matter how outrageous she would think it was, he would give it a shot regardless. As he said before though, it was merely a delay tactic, or at least that would be all Makoto would have to see it as. How about you choose Naruto as your daughters and your own choice? Makoto had been staring at the floor until that point, but was now openly gaping at the Hokage. Naruto. But he is only 7 years old. And I adopted him as an Uchiha. We are practically mother and son now. He wouldn't understand. I would feel like I'm betraying his trust by using him like that. Hiruzen nodded. He could see where she was coming from. I know Makoto-san. But Naruto does not have to know of the arrangement between you two until he is older, when you have to fulfill the craw. Telling him of his engagement to Sasuke, however, would be satisfactory and keep them both from asking any further questions. Makoto calmed a bit, but still looked unsure over the situation, feeling a pit of guilt growing in her stomach. Hiruzen moved closer to her and put a comforting hand on her shoulder, indicating she looked at him. I'm very sorry that you have been thrust into the spotlight like this. If anything, you should be mourning your clan right now, and my teammates and I should be kissing your feet in apologies. However, we both must look at the situation at what is best for you and your children. Introducing a total stranger as your partner to the children will affect them terribly at this young of age, not to mention you yourself would not be happy at all. Naruto and Sasuke surely get along and would have plenty of time to warm up to the idea of marriage, giving you plenty of time to find the right partner as they grow up. Who knows, you might even decide to choose Naruto as well, no matter how outrageous that sounds now. He quickly added the outrageous part, seeing her disgusted face. It wasn't that she didn't think Naruto to be an unattractive boy when he would grow up, being the son of the Yondaime surely gave her plenty to imagine in his older age. However, she had already begun to see him as a son and felt that he saw her as an adult and maybe later a mother. Their relationship couldn't go farther than that in her eyes, as long as the two kept on the same thought process. I think you are right, Hokage-sama. I'm afraid they won't allow it though, especially not for the both of us. He is seen to them as a powerful tool to the village, not some select male breeding stock. Hiruzen pondered it for a moment before moving over to his desk and opening up a drawer where he pulled out a scroll. Well then, he said with a smirk. We will just have to prove to them he is proper breeding material. Uchiha compound. Here, Naruto and Sasuke were coming home after a long day of school. Nothing much new was learned that day, and the two new family members were excited for their next activity. Sasuke was leading him through the compound to the pier. Her father took her to take the initiation test herself. There she would teach him the hand signs and let him try it. Of course, she had no idea how to actually teach someone a technique at her age. For Uchiha, the fire affinity usually came quite naturally and didn't take much effort for such a simple to be formed. Naruto was a wild card in the subject though. There was no telling if he could even manipulate fire, let alone control his chakra for it. The day was sunny, as usual for the warm fire country. Even though she knew it had no real effect on fire, Sasuke always liked to think that the sun gave her luck with her initiation test. Maybe Naruto would get that luck too. Come on Naruto, it's over here. Sasuke ran ahead of Naruto as he did his best to keep up. He had plenty of energy, but she seemed to be bursting at the seams. Wait up Sasuke-chan. I can't run that fast. She ignored him and ran ahead, coming to a stop at the mouth of the pier on the small lake on the edge of the compound. It was then her excited smile gave way to a small frown. This was one of the only fond memories she had of her father. It was here she pulled him along to see her successful fireball, and where he had shown her a smile, one that was directed to her with pride. He had never done that before with her, not even with her good grades. He always saved them for Itachi. Sasuke had her mother for praise and smiles, but she still wanted approval from her father. Because he reserved his only for when he was truly impressed, that was why it made such an impact on her. And now he was dead, killed by the man who he poured all his pride and love into. Sasuke felt so vulnerable at that moment, she didn't even realize a few tears had fallen from her eyes. Naruto had finally caught up with the girl to see she was just standing there, not saying anything. Since she was staring at the pier, her back was toward him, keeping him from seeing her tears. Naruto saw her shake a bit and went over to see what was wrong, confused at her sudden change. Sasuke. Are you okay? This woke the girl up, and she quickly brushed her cheeks free of the tears. No need to worry Naruto with my problems. He's dead now anyway. Itachi is out of my reach too. Right, now I just have to care for Naruto and Kasan. Yeah. Sasuke replied, coughing a bit to quiet the flutter in her voice. I'm fine Naruto. Come on, I'll show you the hand signs now. Naruto kept staring at her for a second, but then shrugged in ignorance. Absolute zero ability in reading emotions. Sasuke went through the hand signs one slowly for Naruto to see, giving him a chance to practice with just the movements. Then, going through them with a practiced speed and ease, Sasuke created a small fireball that extended some amount over the water from the pier. Naruto watched the fire blow in the wind with a trance as it raced from Sasuke's mouth and then dissipated back to its point of origin. Okay Naruto, you try. What followed for 2 full hours was Naruto's attempt at channeling his overwhelming amounts of chakra into a fireball. Unfortunately, his body just could not get a handle on the manipulation of the chakra, let alone infusing it with a natural affinity he might not have had. Naruto felt it was a bad start to training, but Sasuke took it especially hard as she thought it was her fault. Sorry Naruto-kun. Sasuke teared up a bit as she apologized to the confused Naruto. I must be a terrible sensei if I couldn't help you learn something so simple like this. Maybe Iruka-sensei could. Naruto cut her off with a hug that shocked her into silence. That's not Sasuke-chan, I'm sure with more practice I can get it. You are a great teacher, I like listening to you a lot more than Iruka-sensei. Not to mention you're prettier than him. Sasuke blushed at his comment, even if Naruto was ignorantly comparing her cuteness to a guy. I'll take what I can get. Thank you Naruto. How about we go home for today and try again tomorrow? I bet Kasan is back from her meeting by now anyway. We should welcome her. Naruto agreed and the two set off for home, feeling better than when they arrived. Makoto's house. Family room. Makoto waited for the children to arrive, however, she was too lost in her own thoughts to hear the door open and shut with childish laughter and the pitter-patter of feet on wood to notice the arrival of her children. She had just promised her daughter and herself to a 7-year-old boy who was the outcast of the village. Was that not crossing some line? What would her friend Kushina say to her marrying her son? You go girl. Show Sachi-kun how a cougar does it. Makoto blushed, better she did not think of it. Still though, the prospect of morality wasn't the only thing that concerned her. The council's demands were strict and binding to the contract craw. They would have no choice to follow if they wanted any semblance of freedom in the village. To protect her children, she would have had to have taken this course of action, which is why she did so. The elders were at first outraged at the thought of us marrying Naruto, but Hirazen's quick thinking and persuasive tactics allowed them to think they had all bases covered. In a way they do though, no matter what will happen with my choices, they will get Uchiha children. Still though, at least Sasuke may be happy with the choice. Hasan, Naruto and Sasuke tackled the woman as she sat there in a trance, waking her up from her inner thoughts. The family shared a laugh as they lay on the cold floor, just staring at the ceiling in a moment of closeness. Makoto glanced at the two and noticed how they seemed happy, so oblivious to the world of problems that surrounded them. Better it stayed that way though, she thought. What was a child without blissful ignorance? It was their right after all. How was school today? You two, Makoto asked and got the usual grumbles, even from Sasuke. It looked like Naruto's enthusiasm for school was rubbing off on her honor student. We will be learning about chakra manipulation and nature elements next though mother, so maybe Naruto can do the initiation. Afterward. Makoto was reminded of Naruto's initiation by that remark and made to ask how it went. I didn't pass class and Naruto said quietly as he looked up at her with disappointed eyes. But I will keep trying so I can be a real Uchiha, like you said. I want to be with you guys. Makoto smiled as she felt him hug her tighter and rubbed his back in comfort. You already are with us, Naruto-kun, don't feel pressured into completing the technique. Since you are going to learn about it anyway, I'll tell you about nature chakra now. The 5 basic elements are water, earth, wind, fire, and lightning. Each person has at least one affinity and can train themselves to harness more, but there is no guarantee of one particular element. Makoto lectured them in a professional, motherly tone on the subject, as it wasn't something academy students could grasp easily without first-hand knowledge. Naruto, natural-born Uchiha generally always have a fire affinity, meaning they can use fire techniques without any intensive training. You come from the Uzumaki though, a very well-known clan that used water as a primary affinity. Naruto suddenly felt very down that he had the opposite affinity, but Makoto encouraged him to continue listening. But that doesn't mean you have water and it doesn't mean you don't have fire. We will just have to have you practice and see what you can and can't do. I know if you work hard enough, you can master any technique. Sasuke, who was on the other side of Makoto, sat up to look at Naruto and smiled. Yeah Naruto, you are an Uchiha like us. Uchiha are powerful and can learn any technique, so I'm sure you can learn Genkakik in no time. Naruto felt encouraged and nodded in assent, making that part of the conversation done. So Ka-san. How did your meeting go? Sasuke asked after a while of more silence and staring at the ceiling. Makoto knew this was coming up and decided against keeping much from either of them, just what Hiruzen suggested. If Naruto knew he was marrying both of them, the thoughts of her being his mother and wife would confuse his young mind between both titles and could break their current relationship. Besides, it wasn't anything he had to worry about for a while. The council said that I have to be pregnant by him turning 18, so we have plenty of time for me to think of something. Makoto was at least thankful they had so much time, not expecting the elders to give them such space to work with. Well, the Hokage and I talked about the Uchiha and what will happen. With us in the future. She had a pause halfway through, trying to think of the best way to word it. The kids didn't mind and listened closely. The Hokage said that because the Uchiha are so powerful, we have to make sure that we have ways to keep the clan going in the future. This is so difficult with children so young as them, I can't use the term breeder else they will overreact. Yeah. How do we make more Uchiha? Ka-san, Sasuke muttered in thought, trying to figure out how that would work out. Her mother had the decency to hide her blush and cursed as Naruto seemed to adopt a thinking pose too. That's something you will find out when you are older. Their mother's quick reply made them quiet down and accept it for truth, allowing her to continue with her awkwardly worded conversation. It was decided that we had to ensure that in the future we could have more Uchiha. And that you two could stay together very closely to help with this. Sasuke seemed to be catching on, something her mother wasn't surprised of. However, Naruto seemed to still be trying to wrap his head around the idea. Hopefully he will grow out of this. It's probably because he doesn't have much experience with people. You two are engaged to be wed in the future, when you are older. This is to ensure the clan's line continues without any problems. Makoto trailed off as her daughter blushed and Naruto was still thinking, apparently not hearing what she said. We are going to be like you and Tusan. Makoto just nodded, accepting the comparison. Hopefully there will be more love though than our marriage. Then again, it's starting out just like ours did, an arranged one. Sasuke said nothing, mulling the thought over. She liked Naruto for sure, but at such a young age, it was impossible to think over such a big change to her future. It would take time, she figured, to get used to, but her mother was someone she could trust, and they would have plenty of time to think it over and get used to each other. Okay. I trust you, Ka-san. Makoto smiled and gave her daughter a small hug as Naruto was still sitting up, thinking over what she had said. So. The two turned to him, figuring he had arrived at a conclusion finally. Is this marriage thing like some special brother-sister thing the Uchiha do? Because I don't know what it is. Makoto just gaped at him in amazement he didn't understand yet, and Sasuke grumbled and sighed. My future husband is a baka. Great. She droned sarcastically while Makoto started explaining the prospect of two people being married. Once Naruto had been thoroughly explained to the whole process, he was fully embarrassed and blushing like Sasuke was. Still though, he was 7, and they both didn't comprehend everything that went into marriage, even if they thought they did. They've got plenty of time too. Sasuke has to have a child by 16. By then it will be clear if they like each other or not. If not, then they will have plenty of friends from the academy to choose from. Makoto was as satisfied as she could be with the outcome of things, if only for now. Alright you two. It's getting late. I'll go make us some food, and then it's off to bed for you two. Makoto hurried to the task she had given to herself, while they went out into the garden to bathe in the last of the sun's rays. Makoto watched them play through the kitchen window, smiling at their carefree attitudes, even after such a bomb had been dropped on them, regardless of her trying to soften the blow. As long as they are still smiling, I have a reason to keep trying for Konoha and for the Uchiha. Makoto's home, Naruto's room. Makoto was tucking Naruto in again as she did the previous night, however, this time she had to broach a particular subject to him, as it was brought up by the council. Hiruzen was not wrong when he mused on their interest in the Sharingan for future transplant operations. What he nor Makoto had expected was they put Naruto forward as one of the receivers. While they knew that giving him the Sharingan would in no way increase the chance of her or Sasuke having children with the gene, they figured it would be a worthy investment into the village's weapon if they could give him the Sharingan eyes. It was even more in favor because he was now adopted into the Uchiha family, who better for him to help harness these powers than the owners of it themselves. If Makoto wasn't around, she seriously doubted they would still consider the transplant, for he would have no one to learn from, a book in the hands of a person who was illiterate. But what mattered to her the most was Naruto's opinion. If he didn't want the eyes, then she wouldn't let him have them, end of story. Even if she knew she could train him to protect himself better with them if they forced their eyes on him, she would not force the boy through any more than he had already been through manipulation. Naru-kun. Makoto purred in his ear as his tired eyes turned to her, noticing she still remained at his bedside when he was covered by a blanket. Yes, Maiko-chan. He responded with a tired yawn, saying her nickname again in response to her name for him. Do you remember when you asked me about the Sharingan? He nodded. You said you wanted the red eyes. Why do you want them? Naruto's tiredness set aside for later. He sat up in bed and looked into her onyx orbs with determination. Why are you asking? Ka-san. Makoto swallowed the lump in her throat and continued hesitantly. Ka-san can give you the red eyes you want. But you will lose your blue ones. Do you want that? She was almost choking up with tears asking him this. How could she make a 7-year-old choose to lose something as personal as his own eyes? Naruto's response made her almost choke. Yes, I want the Ka-san. I want red eyes. He said it so seriously that she couldn't even put it off as a joke. What did he mean he wanted them? Naruto. Do you know what you are saying? Why would you give up your blue eyes when you've had them forever? Naruto looked down at his blanket and gripped it tightly with his hands, knuckles turning white. I want to be strong enough to protect Ka-san and Sasuke, just like Itachi Nai said to. Makoto flinched at her son's name, but was surprised Naruto cared that much to protect them when they had only known each other for a few days. If I can be strong with the red eyes. Naruto said with emotion choking up his throat too as he began to cry. I will lose my blue ones if I can protect you, Maiko-chan. She couldn't help but feel warm at his vow to protect her, even if it came from a 7-year-old. Naruto, why would you go so far for us? We have only been together for a few days. How can you feel so strongly about protecting the Uchiha? Naruto looked at her, his sniffling stopped and his voice cleared so she could hear his reason that she still reflected on far into the future. Because. The Uchiha gave me a chance. You and Sasuke gave me love. And that is something I will die for to keep intact. Makoto began to cry and hugged her son, thankful that he was so passionate about love, something that had been missing from their family for so long. That was why she wasn't uncomfortable at all when she called Naruto her son. Thank you. Sachi-kun. I love you very, very much. Naruto wrapped his tiny arms around her and snuggled into her bosom, crying. I love you too. Ka-chan. He was a bit muffled by Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto married with Makoto, part 2, subscribe if you enjoy the video, and also check the description, so let's begin the story. On Hagakure, Uchiha compound. Morning in the Uchiha compound that day was not as quiet as Sasuke was used to as she groaned in bed. Faint voices murmured veiled words through her door. Although she didn't know exactly what the conversation was, she knew the two culprits of it. Naruto and Makoto were in the kitchen, probably eating breakfast together, as had become the custom in the house, since Naruto was used to waking up in his own time. It didn't take long for the boy to find out when his adoptive mother would wake, and he too would follow suit, so he could talk to her, be near her. Naruto had been starved of social stimulation since he was born, and he was eager to make up for that lost time, something of which Makoto happily embraced as it was the first time she had a helper in the kitchen. When it came down to his cooking skills, he left a lot to be desired. However, as Sasuke remembered, it didn't take long before Makoto stopped his ramen breakfast spree quickly. Before the girl could realize it, Naruto was making a breakfast to rival feasts her mother had prepared in the past. Makoto had never been so proud. The same timeline would have happened for Sasuke, but her father made her focus more on schoolwork, and surpassing her brother was already an impossible task that left no room for teaching her how to cook. Geez, their bonding time always wakes me up. Sarcasm dripped as she crawled out of bed with only an oversized t-shirt acting as her cover. The day was the day she, along with the rest of the class, would take their graduation exam. Although they kept the details secret, Sasuke was confident both her and Naruto could pass easily. At least I hope the baka does. It wouldn't if when we got married I was Jonin, and he was still a genin. Giggling at the thought, dressing in her usual school look was as quick as it was simple. As always, she wore her high-collar blue shirt with the Uchiha crest stamped proudly on the back. With the shirt taken care of, it was then onward to her tougher choice, a short skirt that came to her mid-thighs or her usual beige shorts. Thinking better of changing the routine for such an uneventful day, Sasuke decided to wear the skirt tomorrow to indicate her fresh start as a genin. Slipping on her blue sandals, Sasuke headed toward the bathroom to check just what her hair had in store for her today. She looked into the mirror to see that other than a few stray hairs, her long and flowing dark blue hair was still in good shape. It wasn't long before she began to play with it, tying it into pigtails before almost vomiting. To redeem herself, she tried a ponytail that her mother sometimes wore, but thought that could also be done at a later date. Uchiha settled for her usual look and decided to see what the commotion was all about with those two finally, as they had just about resorted to yelling her name. The halls reverberated her covered feet and told the two in the family room she was on her way. "What do you two want?" Sasuke stopped mid-sentence as she saw the two sitting across from each other enjoying their meal, staring at her for her loud interruption. "Sorry, I didn't realize you had stopped talking." She mumbled an apology. Makoto beamed at her daughter, all she could see was progress and progress. Though her daughter had lost some of her more girlish manners as age passed, Makoto was still proud to see that her daughter had not lost her feminine touch. "Sasuke-chan, so nice of you to join us." Sasuke glanced at her mother and just gave in response to her prodding. "Yeah, well, I bet even if I hadn't come in you two would still be enjoying yourselves. You get along really well." Sasuke looked at Naruto, who had been quietly eating, silently laughing at the situation. "Tch, mama's boy." Naruto had the decency to hide his blush with a loud slurp of his soup brought all the way to his face. Makoto giggled at his reaction. It was true he spent most of his time at the compound with her. Not that she minded though, in fact she quite enjoyed having such a happy face to welcome her home. It was much different than the past, something Makoto did very well at not focusing on anymore. "I have enough problems these days to worry about what happened 6 years ago." Makoto took a small sip of green tea to clear her thoughts about the Kra and her stress from maintaining their clan status. Meet after meeting regarding Uchiha this, Uchiha that, proposal options here, children there. I could make a profession out of denying the elders every turn I got to speak. It's just become so stressful I almost wonder if telling them would do any good. You know, it's almost like you two are the married ones. This time it was Makoto's turn to show a reaction, spitting out her green tea back onto her plate and Naruto was about to laugh at Sasuke's joke when he got green tea all over his black shirt and looked to see an embarrassed and blushing Makoto quickly set her cup down and cover her mouth in embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Naruto-kun, hang on, I'll get a towel." She ran off into the kitchen as the siblings exchanged glances, not understanding her odd reaction. "Mom's weird. I'll have to remember this. Ka-san has a thing for Naruto." The siblings agreed to their thoughts as Makoto ran back in and began to clean Naruto's face and shirt with her towel. It wasn't that much, but enough that it would be uncomfortable to leave, and Naruto would definitely be wearing another shirt today. "Hey Kasa!" Naruto was cut off as she continued to dab his skin and shirt with the towel vigorously, and he figured she was really taking this badly. "Maiko-chan, it's fine, I can handle it." Makoto realized she looked a bit too overzealous in her redemption and blushed in embarrassment at just how close her son was to her. "No, it's not like that. They don't really know about the engagement, it was just a figure of speech." Why yes you are right Naruto, here take it. Naruto proceeded to take the towel and clean himself off as Sasuke enjoyed her breakfast, thoroughly enjoying the interaction after the conclusion she came to in her thoughts. But leave the shirt when you leave for school, I will clean it for you. Naruto let out a sigh, but nodded. The woman would not take no for an answer, so he gave in as usual. He set down the towel and proceeded to take off his t-shirt he had been wearing to bed, decent only thanks to his boxers. Both Uchiha women shook their heads at his nonchalant take on manners, but ignored it, as they wanted to escape the strict rules the house had been under in the past. They wanted to lighten up a bit and even take in a little of Naruto's happiness, except of course they weren't willing to strip down to their undergarments in the house. Regardless, Naruto had greatly influenced their lives and so far it was for the better. Sasuke and Makoto both had recovered from any sort of long-lasting symptoms of depression that the village doctors had expected. Naruto had also improved both his social and ninja skills since being inducted into the Uchiha, all culminating with the implant of his Sharingan eyes. Okay Ka-san, I'll go get a new shirt and Sasuke and I can go. We have our big test today. Makoto suddenly remembered as her daughter rolled her eyes, it wasn't as big of a deal as he made it. That's right, you two will be taking your final step to Genin. I'm so proud she gushed, already thinking of a way to reward them for how far they had come. It's not that big of a deal Ka-san, the tests so far have been a joke. They actually figure that what they teach us will be challenging, but Naruto and I learn them the first time we see them without a Sharingan. Makoto laughed at her daughter's expense. Her frustration was nothing less of what was expected of an Uchiha prodigy. Try to be more understanding like your brother Sasuke-chan, he knows how important they are in the future of your ninja career. Naruto shrugged. He didn't think much of the techniques, but if his Ka-san was happy he was too. Please, Naruto could care less than I do. Sasuke drowned, but Makoto dutifully ignored her, remembering the sad event that befell Naruto 6 years ago that led him to not having a Sharingan. Naruto had yet to take advantage of the ability, even once. It was because when he first attempted to use them, he promptly almost fainted from the pain and chakra usage. No single up until that point had affected Naruto like that, but he knew that it wasn't really chakra exhaustion, but his body's difficulty in getting used to the new organs. There was also the fact to consider that no one else, not even his family, realized he had these Sharingan eyes. Along with the elders and Hokage were the only ones who stood in on his operation of Yugaku Uchiha's eyes transferring to his body. While the operation was a success, upon fully linking the eyes to be compatible with the body, the red Sharingan disappeared back into a sky blue, albeit with a slightly darker tint. The elders were outraged and demanded to know what happened, while the medics had no explanation. It seemed as if Naruto's body rejected the eyes and shut it off, permanently. As Naruto was unconscious for his recovery, it was then he learned exactly why that happened, and what he had yet to reveal to his family for their own safety. Flashback, 6 years ago, Naruto's mind. Naruto's head hurts, the last thing to remember is holding his mother's hand before the doctors put him to sleep for the operation. The operation that was going to give him red eyes to protect Sasuke and Makoto. His eyes. Naruto got up quickly and looked around, noticing his new environment was far from a hospital room. It was dank and dark with lots of pipes and a single direction to go, forward. On the ground he saw a puddle and excitedly ran over to look at his eyes, the new ones. It was met with disappointment when his eyes were the same as always, plain blue. What happened? Where were his new eyes? Why was he here and what exactly happened in the operating room? Fear gripped him as a sudden fear of his new surroundings invaded his mind, allowing the other presence to sense his feelings. I sense your unease, come forward boy, and I will explain further. Naruto heard the voice, but was scared of it. It was loud and demonic. It felt like it was coming from everywhere, but there was only one place it wanted him to go, toward the end of the hallway. Well come now you help. Do not try my patience lest I take back my favor. Figuring it wasn't a good idea to make the thing angry, he ran forward until he was in a big room with a cage on the other end with a seal locking it. What are you? Naruto stood before an awesome beast, the size something he could never fathom at his age. It reminded him of a fox with what he could see, the large orange ears, snout, mischievous smirk, and the swirling tails that Naruto thought looked in infinite numbers. I grumbled in a mocking tone. Now that the boy was closer he had to reserve his usual booming voice for a quieter setting. I am Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox that is sealed within you, a tiny human brat that just inherited a dangerous weapon that doesn't belong to you. Naruto gulped as he emphasized Naruto's place on his respect totem pole, quite low. To keep both you and I safe, I created a simple trick of the eyes to make them think you gained no such power. If they think you are weak as you grow older and stronger, you will be able to reveal to them your true power as you strike at their hearts with fire, blade, and fear. From that, Naruto understood that Kyuubi had done something to make his eyes seem unaffected, when really he did have the red eyes. So that means I really do have. Naruto quieted down as he began to feel his eyes with the newfound information, practically jumping with relief. Yes, you simpleton, you still have the Sharingan of the Uchiha. He said the name as if it was dirt under his foot, making Naruto a little angry. How dare he treat his family's name like that? Kyuubi sensed the change in reaction and laughed in the boy's face. Please, do you really think you are a true Uchiha? You have the name, the crest, even now you have their eyes, but what you don't have is their fiery hatred, the will to conquer. If I could have influenced that in your early stages, I would have, but it seemed as though your parents were thorough in your control over me. Honestly, I'm surprised I was able to do such a simple trick as hide your eyes. The blonde gasped at the mention of his real parents. No one had told him anything of them. And again, he never thought to ask anymore that he was living with the Uchiha. You knew my parents? Kyuubi eyed the boy, his mocking smirk gone, replaced with an annoyed scowl. That is a tale that will come in time, boy. He said simply, but realized he made it sound like these talks would often and quickly rectify his words. But only I decide when to speak to you, not the other way around. If I must be stuck in you, then it is my sad fate. I will have to help you survive with my power, however, on my own terms. Your power? Kyuubi scowled, the boy knew nothing of what he held within. For now my chakra will grant you healing in addition to keeping up the facade you have with your normal eyes, revealing the Sharingan to no one, until you are ready to live with the consequences. What consequences? Naruto didn't like the sound of that. Kyuubi glared at him and then shook his head in annoyance. The consequence of being a strong shinobi. Present time. Naruto had begun to wrap his head around what Kyuubi said when he was younger. Now that he had a grasp of a ninja's life, strong shinobi were historically hunted and fought over for their power. Of course they kept their own will and often ended up fighting both sides of the tug of war, but one could not make their life like that. That was what led to Senju and Uchiha together into Konoha's founding. They could no longer take the tug of war that forced their clans to go against one another by villages and countries. Naruto would use his Sharingan to protect his important people. That was all that mattered to him in the end anyway. He would go all out to protect the two girls in front of him, no matter if it cost him his life. I'll die to keep that love intact. Naruto. Are you okay? You spaced out for a moment. Makoto looked at him worriedly as he just stood in the doorway looking at them with a blank stare. He shook his head clear and waved off to the two. Yeah, just got lost for a moment there and thought, I'll go change. Makoto and Sasuke glanced at each other and shrugged it off. Naruto still took some figuring out. Ah-san, what will you be doing during school today? Sasuke asked, which surprised Makoto. Generally the girl had just accepted that Makoto was quite busy with meetings and such. I have another meeting with the elders to review your engagement with Naruto. Sasuke's eyes widened and she blushed from the reminder, uncharacteristic of her usual stoic behavior. I might also get some information about which squad you're in and who your sensei will be. She hoped to arouse her daughter's interests but received nothing but a glance. She is still trying to keep her thoughts off the subject. She is nervous they won't be on a team together because of their place in the class. Naruto was ranked second to Sasuke amongst the other class of around 20 other academy students, making it seem as if the two would be spread amongst two teams to keep the skill level high. However, Makoto had a good feeling that the two would be together for numerous reasons, one amongst them mother instinct. And the elders would jump at the chance to have them be close at all times at the very least, if the two end up having a child earlier than scheduled. Not that Makoto thought that either would do so, but they would enjoy each other's company in comparison to the rest of the class. Alright, Naruto yelled in a rambunctious voice as he opened the door with a new black Uchiha collar shirt and a big smile. You ready to go? Suki-chan? A bowl of half-eaten rice was his answer as the annoyed girl walked past him and toward the front door. What did I tell you about the name? It was his pet name for her, like Maiko-chan, but Sasuke was embarrassed by it and tried to make him stop. Secretly he knew she loved it as he saw her blush many times when they were alone, but he often did it just to tease her. He quickly began to pick up the rice so he could catch up, but a soft hand grabbed him, making him stop and look to see his smiling mother. Go on, Naruto, I don't want you to be late for school. My meeting doesn't start for a while anyway. Naruto looked unsure, but with an embarrassing peck on his cheek, the blonde ran out of the house to catch up with his annoyed sister. Makoto laughed as she picked up the food. He was too easy to tease. On Hagakure Ninja Academy, the two Uchiha made it on time, surprising with how much time they wasted at home. As they entered the schoolyard, a combination of Sasuke's presence and the Uchiha crest brought eyes toward them. The rumor mill began to spin as it did every day as Naruto and Sasuke walked closely with one another, practically holding hands. It wasn't that there were some rules they couldn't reveal their relationship to the other kids or anything, they were just still embarrassed. The explanations that both didn't want to do along with obvious comments made about them afterward were most easily kept at bay by keeping a certain distance from one another until they were ready. Nonetheless, it didn't stop the word from spreading. Uchiha Sasuke and Naruto, they awfully look close for brother and sister. Why didn't they tell anyone they were related? I had to find out from my 2 cents. Almost looks like they're going out, she is way too good for him. I wish I was Naruto, he doesn't deserve that. Sasuke is so amazing, too bad her image is wrecked when the blonde stays so close by. Naruto's Uchiha name didn't stop people from despising him, it just gave them more varied reasons. Whether it be from jealousy, hatred of the Nine Tails, or even envy of skills or stature, Naruto was still a target. He didn't mind it so much as he grew up with it half of his life. Sasuke on the other hand still got annoyed. You shouldn't have to take that, Naruto, she mumbled, wondering if he could even hear her as they entered the classroom away from most of the kids. It's okay, Sasuke. Naruto wrapped an arm around her shoulders and brought her in for a hug, making her blush as a few other seated kids saw. As long as I have you in Kasan, I don't care what they say. Sasuke didn't push him away like she used to, instead she liked this warm feeling inside her when they were close. Naruto was waiting for her to get angry and push him away, but instead she leaned in closer and gave a happy sigh as she closed her eyes dreamily. I guess so, Baka. Naruto blushed as they partied a bit to sit down in their chairs, next to one another in the far left corner of the class, mostly just to discourage kids from coming close to them. Sasuke got out of her daze as Naruto's arm left her to sit down, and she quickly assumed her usual position, eyes front and hands interlaced, giving her a bored look. This suited her because it kept boys away and let the teacher know she was still paying attention, even when she wasn't. Alright class, get seated. Iruka and Mizuki entered, both with clipboards that would no doubt be used for their final test grading. The kids scrambled to find their seats. A few boys glanced over at the Uchiha to see Naruto's impenetrable defense of Sasuke still remained. She sat on the far chair with a wall right next to her, and he took the middle, preventing anyone else from sitting by her. The worst part was she never gave any thought or sympathy to them when they wanted to sit by her, instead allowing her brother to do as he pleased. A few girls did in fact like Naruto, but were too scared Sasuke would do something or too nervous to do anything about it. They also figured out along with the boys that whether they were siblings or not, the two did not seem interested in anything other than each other whenever they were seen. Iruka surveyed the class to ensure they were all quiet and listening, landing on the Uchiha pair with a small smirk. The two were sure to ace the test with their grades, and it would be his honor to pass them after the hard work they put in, no matter how much they acted like it was just simple chores. I don't know what kind of training Makoto Uchiha-sama does to make them so at ease with our training regimen, but it definitely shows. They have no one even close to their scores in academics or ninja training. In all honesty, they could have graduated early, but the Hokage requested they stay in for the full run, along with permission from Makoto. Whatever reason they wanted them to stay with the class was beyond Iruka, but there were admittedly few who could be a match for them as a teammate. The day we will finish the 3-part graduation exam as we finished taking the written exam on Monday, the ninja tool exercise yesterday, and now for your test today. Those who pass with overall acceptable scores and perform to at least a 70% in each category will be allowed to move on and graduate from the academy. The usual excited murmurs came up, and Iruka waved them off as he indicated a door near the chalkboard. The test will take place there where Mizuki and I will test you on the bunchen. Mizuki just finished writing the order of students to come up on the chalkboard as the two prepared to depart. Please follow the order Mizuki-sensei has written on the board. First student Shino Aburam, please come with us to the testing area. Shino felt eyes on him as he slowly got up and followed the teachers into the room, leaving the rest to their thoughts. The usual glances made no surprise to the Uchiha as they waited patiently. Naruto emulated Sasuke's serious pose in an attempt to annoy her, and he realized it was working as she sent him a glare. Idiot, you know why I try to look serious all the time? Naruto smiled and brought his arm around her again to tease her, making all eyes tune to the area immediately. Of course, Asuki-chan, but I don't like you being serious all the time. I like seeing you smile too. She blushed and allowed him to pull her closer for a hug. The moment ended when they both felt they weren't alone. Naruto looked behind him to see a boy from their class, Hibachi, standing in the aisle with crossed arms and an annoyed but cocky look on his face. The only way they remembered who he was because of two things, his bandana and the fact that he didn't like Naruto because he was always with Sasuke. To her, he was nothing. To him, it was his ticket to popularity to date her and become the next boy Uchiha. Naruto was always in his way though, and when he saw her smile when he put his arm around her, Hibachi decided now was the time to make a move while the teachers were out. Hey you, back off her, he said with a tough guy voice, but failed when Naruto and Sasuke heard him squeak as the Uchiha turned to glare at him. She's my family, you don't have a say in what we do. Sasuke liked the way Naruto spoke with an edge to his voice, especially since he was defending her. Why yeah well she didn't look too happy about it. Hibachi defended with a stutter, feeling the class begin to snicker behind his back. What do you want? Sasuke asked with an attitude. He was annoying her when she was about to get closer to Naruto during class. Sasuke-san, I think in that sense we're both gonna be genin soon, and that means we both will be strong. It's time I ask you out on a date. Drop this loser of a brother, Naruto's glare intensified as he paused before continuing in a mumble. And go out with me. Sasuke wanted to roll her eyes. If the guy thought she would pity him, he was very wrong. Whether he knew it or not, Sasuke was taken, and she didn't even know the kid to begin with, so she decided to let Naruto handle it. Naru-kun, get rid of him from me. Naruto smirked, never taking his eyes off of Hibachi, as he stood up and cracked his knuckles. You got it, Suki-chan. Any requests? The class fell deathly silent as Hibachi began to shake in fear. They were being serious, weren't they? He got rejected and he was going to get beat up on the same day. Not if he had anything to say about it. I'm not afraid of Yu. He took a basic stance of defense as Sasuke's deadly smirk unnerved him as she gave Naruto one rule. No blood on me. Naruto took a step forward, making the boy flinch. He took a long stride, so he was now crouching low under Hibachi's body and sent a single uppercut right into his jaw. The boy felt pain as he momentarily was lifted off the ground and then sent flying across a desk when Naruto kicked him in the stomach. He landed on the other side of the room and, trying his best to nurse his pride, dragged himself back to his seat as Naruto returned to his spot with Sasuke. Nice, Naruto, but the kick was a little too much for him, I think. Naruto scratched the back of his head, displaying a carefree smile, weirding some out after he showed such an evil smirk before. Sorry, guess I forgot my own strength. Sasuke just shook her head in disbelief and returned to her world of boredom until they were called in. It was obvious of their outcome though to everyone in the school. The Uchiha had passed their final test. On Hagakure, Hokage's mansion, office, and so you still remember the terms of our agreement. Uchiha Dono, the elders and Hokage were once again with Makoto in a meeting basically to review their past agreements. Yes, elders, she sighed in exasperation. The amount of times they asked that over the past few years, and they still thought she would conveniently forget. I know the terms of the CRA. Sasuke must have a child by 16 and myself by Naruto's age of 18. The elders nodded and were glad she remembered. A shame that boy did not take the transplant. The Sharingan could have strengthened him. Further. Makoto was actually somewhat happy compared to their disappointment. It meant Naruto would still be normal. The set of Sharingan eyes were not exactly subtle, especially to his classmates. If the transplant had worked, she would have definitely encouraged Naruto to hide them to keep his strength secret. But thoughts of it didn't matter much as they were past that opportunity. Moving on, I'm sure Makoto Dono would appreciate a break from the usual questioning you two give her. The Hokage stepped in after the silence, ignoring the glares sent by his teammates. It came to my attention that you wanted to see the finalized list of teams. Is that correct? Makoto nodded. She was quite anxious to see exactly who her children ended up with, although she was surely not going to be surprised after the amount of recommendations she gave the Hokage. Truthfully, there was only one Jonin who had the qualifications to push them to their limits and further train Sasuke's. Ada Kakashi. As you requested and I supported, Jonin Hada Kakashi has been appointed to lead Team 7. The squad consists of Sasuke, Naruto, and Shino Aburam. Makoto thought over the Aburam boy. She didn't suggest him, but it wasn't a bad choice. Her children excelled in ninjutsu and taijutsu, combining the offensive power with the Aburam's brains and hidden clan, and they would make a deadly combination. A hybrid of tracking and offense, a kill team is what she likened it to. The Aburam. Odd choice, Hiruzen Kaharu muttered as she tried to figure out the Hokage's choice in the third member. Hiruzen merely shrugged and gave a who knows smile. They could get along very well together, as I see particular links in their personalities, as well as having a good combination of skills that will make them a lethal force as they grow. Under Kakashi's tutelage, I have no doubt they will be the strongest if not most successful team Konoha produces for many years to come. Makoto was glad to hear his praise of her children, sensing no deception in his words, as she often found with the empty compliments of the elders. She almost preferred Danzo, at least he told her straight up they hated each other. Better than doing it behind her back. On Hagakure Streets, Sunset, Naruto had taken Sasuke on their first official date to celebrate graduation. In reality, it was just a fun little lunch they had together after they got out of school. The two really felt their awkwardness disappear as they just spent time together eating out at the small restaurant together without parental supervision, and the feeling of being suddenly a lot older than they really were. The reactions from the populace who saw them together was relatively positive. Many of the younger townsfolk saw them as a cute couple, and younger boys and girls swooned in jealousy of their pair. Even then, some ninja and older civilians who remembered the attack clearly still saw Naruto as the Nine Tails and refused to acknowledge the heiress would choose such a thing to be with. Naruto was walking along with Sasuke, who had her hands hidden in her pockets and her hair swaying behind her as they made their way home. Naruto was just looking up at the sky with an odd, thoughtful face as they walked along, and Sasuke was somewhat annoyed that he was paying more attention to the sky than her. They had just gotten off their first date, as much as he didn't consider it one, and now he wouldn't even hold her hand home. She took a daring glance at him as it hung limply at his sides, swaying back and forth a bit with each step. A blush crept over her face as she took her right hand out of her pocket and made for a grab. I don't really know why, but I just don't care what people say when they see us holding hands. I just want him to hold me a little closer. Just before she could grab his hand and take it in hers, he stopped walking, making her just brush against it. Naruto looked into the sky again as he didn't even notice Sasuke's actions. His instincts had been right, there was something very wrong. Bathed in a sheen of orange and with a bit of glare, Mizuki was very difficult for Naruto to see off in the distance, but the boy could see the large scroll on his back. It seemed like their teacher was making a late withdrawal from the Hokage mansion, and no one was trying to stop him. Naruto, what's the matter? Sasuke was getting a bit worried as well as annoyed. He rarely acted like this, and it was scaring her. Naruto looked at her for what felt like the first time since they left their date spot, and she could easily tell his fake smile from his real one. Naruto didn't want to freak her out and decided he would investigate alone. It was probably nothing anyway. It's nothing, I just remembered something I had to get. Go on ahead and welcome Kasan, tell her I'll give her a back rub when I get back. Sasuke was confused and angry as he jumped away into the lowering sun as night began to fall. Why did Naruto show her his fake smile? He hasn't done that since we were little. He would give that smile when they would walk the streets and people would glare at him, she would ask, and he would just smile and shrug it off. But age, Sasuke could tell hate from the look, but Naruto still would not admit to anything. Makoto acted as if there was nothing to talk about, but she sensed the two knew more than they let on. I'm not letting you do whatever you're doing alone, Naruto. Sasuke jumped off after him, hoping she could catch up in time. On a Hagakure outskirts, abandoned shed, Mizuki landed with ease at his hideout and with an unbridled smirk, unstrapped a large scroll on his back. His plunder was too easy to get as the guards had become lax at the end of the day, allowing him to sneak into the archives without much fuss. He wondered if he could risk a peek to learn a technique or two for himself, of course to strengthen his bond with his soon-to-be leader, Orochimaru. This was his key for power, but both opportunities offered something great of value. His thoughts of grandeur were cut off when he sensed a new presence and turned to see the Uchiha. It seemed as if the kid was really following him after all. He had hoped it was just nerves, but the blonde was as good as they say, and the kid deserved praise. That was if Mizuki really cared about being his teacher, which he ought. With the Nine Tails in his grasp, he could kill or capture him to further Orochimaru's power. Everything seemed to be going his way today. Mizuki's sickening smirk seemed to confirm what Naruto feared, as it seemed the teacher had cracked, either becoming a traitor or going insane for power. Either way, there was no way he was supposed to have the scroll of sealing, and it was Naruto's duty as a genin of Konoha to stop him. That was what he had earned. The headband for that now was worn proudly on his forehead. So the Kyuubi brat decides to be the village hero and shows up. Naruto stiffened. That was the first time anyone had directly referred to him in relation with Kyuubi. Even though he knew the beast was inside him, it didn't make things any easier on him to hear that. Unfortunately, Mizuki noticed the change in stance and decided to press the wound. Oh? Surprised I know that, Naruto. Everyone knows your friends, your teachers, the ninja who pretend to protect you, even the Hokage, and they all hate you for it. His venom seeped into Naruto's veins, and he felt on fire with anger and fear. Was that really why he felt so separated? Could people hate him so much that they would exile him to a life of solitude even as a child? The answer became all too clear to him as Naruto brought a hand to his face, now embattled with his own inner conflict. Mizuki stalked forward as he was ready to point the dagger at the boy's heart, the Uchiha. Did you think Mikoto-san didn't know? Of course she knew. The Uchiha died to Kyuubi just as well as any other ninja, and they hated you for it too. Even now she took you in because she pitied you. Maybe she planned to kill you, but developed some sick sense of humor in keeping you as her pet. Naruto sank to his knees. This was too much for him to think about. Stop it please. Mizuki undid the strap on his large shuriken attached to his back and began to work it into a spin as he still approached with that sickening smirk. And don't even get me started on your precious sister Sasuke, she'll throw you away faster than I can throw th. Stop it. Or what, Kyuubi boy? Let's see you stop this. Mizuki let loose the shuriken, tired of his game as he realized the boy was already broken. He sobbed on the ground and did not make it to avoid the shuriken. Naruto, snap out of it. He looked up to see Sasuke holding the shuriken in place, one hand in the center wheel, while the other rested comfortably on one of the blades. His sister had stopped the killing blow to the Kyuubi boy. Why did she? Naruto then saw her stiffen up a bit and grunt in pain. Both hands were laced with blood as it trickled down her fingers to the ground. She had caught the shuriken initially with her hands on the blades due to a bad angle in her positioning, but it was the only way she could see in saving Naruto. She had heard all of what Mizuki said, even the part describing Naruto as Kyuubi. There were a few things she still didn't understand, like how Naruto had Kyuubi inside him and what that meant for him, but she did know that what he was saying about her and Mikoto wasn't true. They loved Naruto no matter who or what he was, they were family, and that was tighter than any other bond. Sasuke, why? She heard him croak out the question in mid-sob. I'm the keeper of a monster, I don't deserve this. Sasuke frowned. He was so vulnerable right now after Mizuki's barrage. She would think it cute if the situation was different. Naruto, he looked at her and saw her flashing him a confident smile, very rare for Sasuke to do. The last time she did that was when Naruto mastered the fireball technique at the pier. That was the day he had become a true Uchiha. Mikoto and Sasuke were so proud and he had never felt closer to them afterward. Now it seemed that smile was his salvation in the face of defeat. That's what brothers and sisters are supposed to do, because we're family. Naruto couldn't believe she said that. It reminded him of the past times she had said the same thing. Mizuki just stood there, annoyed at how she brought him back from the brink with just a few words. Besides, she turned back to glare at Mizuki, signaling their fight was back on. If my fiancé goes and gets himself killed, who will I marry then? Damn brat, is that all you can do is talk? Sasuke smirked and readied the shuriken to throw back at him with just as much ferocity as when it was first used. You should know, sensei, you tested me after all. On Hagakure outskirts, abandoned shed, Mizuki glared at Sasuke. Who was she to speak so high and mighty to him? An instructor at Konoha Academy, a Chunin ninja and one of Orochimaru's future chosen. It was blasphemy. He would teach her a lesson for getting in his way with the demon brat. The fight would have to be quick though, no doubt the village was on alert by now with the stolen scroll. Sasuke stood in front of the prone Naruto in a defensive position, in case the man tried to get at him again. She didn't know what his angle was attacking Naruto's emotions like that, but he would pay for it. There was no way this man, not even a Chunin of the Leaf, could beat an Uchiha prodigy like her, or Naruto for that matter. It would be over quickly, and the two could go back to the village as heroes. Naruto didn't know what to do. He willed his body to move, to stand with Sasuke, but it wouldn't. Damn these feelings, I can't move. I'm leaving right now. This is your chance to step back and forget you saw me. Take it or don't. Mizuki threatened, hoping to scare them. It only served to anger Sasuke further. How dare you say that after what you did to Naruto? I won't let you get away with that, Sasuke exclaimed, getting into a battle-ready stance. Mizuki gritted his teeth. It seemed as though he wasn't going to talk his way out of this one. He readied another giant shuriken and gripped it tightly in his left hand. He made a sudden dash forward toward the two Uchiha and made the shuriken spin into a mighty whirlwind, increasing its piercing strength. Sasuke brought her own shuriken up to defend against his diagonal slash, but was shocked to see the weapon break under pressure. She rolled out of the way but was quickly forced back on the defensive as Mizuki threw the large shuriken at her, forcing her to jump backward toward the shed. Mizuki knew that would be too easy for the girl to dodge, so he grabbed a few more small shuriken from his pack and launched them at the spot where the girl would land. That should be enough to keep her occupied. A sudden new presence forced him to look toward the trees as he noticed the green of a Konoha flak vest and knew that he had been caught. Damn, Mizuki leaped backward and threw a kunai at Naruto. It wasn't clear whether he wanted to wound Naruto or to keep the new arrival distracted. Naruto watched as if in slow motion as the kunai flew toward him. A piece of paper whistled in the wind as it was strung to the kunai. An explosive tag. He thought absently, not realizing just how dangerous the weapon was. His eyes widened as it got closer, and a bright white light blinded him and forced his eyes shut. A scream echoed through the trees as night fell on the forest. Naruto quickly opened his eyes to see that he was indeed alive. The attack intended for him had missed its mark. The result was obvious though, a small crater was still smoldering a few feet away from him. Foreign hands were over his head, and a larger body was covering his own in protection. Iruka checked Naruto with his own eyes to see that the boy was alright, if not a bit shell-shocked from the blast. At the last moment, Iruka had landed next to Naruto and deflected the weapon into an angled arc, making it hit the ground away from them as he pushed Naruto to the ground. While there wasn't much time to pay attention, he did remember a scream as the blast went off and quickly checked his surroundings. What he saw made him gasp in terror. Sasuke was up against the shed's wall. A few shurikens surrounded her on the ground. Those were the ones she had time to deflect. The large shuriken had embedded itself in the wall, keeping one of her arms pinned between two of its blades, but otherwise not harming her. Two more smaller shuriken had dug their teeth into her opposite shoulder and leg, immobilizing her. The scream was a combination of pain that she had not experienced before, and seeing the hostile weapon get close to Naruto. As Sasuke looked at the scene in front of her now, a flood of relief washed over her seeing Naruto alive and well. Iruka quickly ran over to her and removed the large shuriken from the wall, sending splinters out toward the man in the ground. The next two were tricky as he did not want to harm the Uchiha and his student, but he knew that it wasn't good to leave them in, or they would only further wound her with movement. Hang on Sasuke-sen, I'm going to remove the shuriken. It will hurt. Sasuke just glared at him, and he quickly began as Naruto picked himself up and ran over to join his teacher and sister. Groans ensued as the two bloody weapons were removed and thrown to the ground, leaving Sasuke bleeding and Naruto even worse off than before. It was his fault she had those wounds, and a sense of guilt and anger festered inside of him. His body had been in shock and wouldn't move, but it was his fault he did not snap out of the fugue sooner to stop Mizuki that his sister in love was hurt. He couldn't take back what had happened, but he could get revenge. Right now. Mizuki got away, Sasuke grunted, looking in the direction he took off. Iruka looked at the girl, amazed she was still in the mood to fight with her challenging tone. With her wounds though, she would only hinder herself in battle and make them worse. Reinforcements could be alerted at the village once he took her to the hospital, but they wouldn't find him in time. It looked like he would have to send Naruto with Sasuke while he pursued his former friend, alone. Iruka was once again cut off as the boy looked at him with what he could only tell was a look of revenge. Sensei, please take my sister to the hospital. I will pursue Mizuki and retrieve the scroll of sealing. Naruto looked at Sasuke and saw concern in her eyes, even if she was the one wounded. But Naruto, you can't take him on alone. You aren't in the condition to. Naruto gave her a knowing look and she quieted down. Something in his eyes told her to calm down, to trust him, so she obeyed. It's my fault you got hurt, Sasuke. You had to protect me while I couldn't do anything to save you. Now I have to finish what I started. Stop Mizuki and make him pay for hurting you. Sasuke blushed as Iruka almost fell over at the sudden turn of events. What happened to a simple situation? Naruto, you don't have the skill level required to fight Mizuki. He's a chunin and you are just barely a genin graduate from the academy. I know him personally and all of his skills, plus my judgment isn't clouded with revenge. Naruto glared at his sensei. He was right, but that didn't stop him from knowing he had to take that guy down. I'm sorry sensei, but I'm the one that caught up to Mizuki first. I started this, and I'm going to finish it too. We don't have time to argue and my sister needs treatment. I'll be back soon. Naruto leaped off into the trees with Iruka and Sasuke watching him leave, powerless to stop him. Hey Naru, the boy was already gone, so Iruka resorted to shouting his last order. Alright. But I'm on my way back. As soon as I dropped Sasuke off, he looked back at the girl and knelt down, offering his shoulder. Sasuke looped her unwounded arm over his back and felt him grab her around the waist to support her. Her brother was going off to get revenge, and she was forced to head back to the village. Naruto might not be able to forgive himself for what happened to her, but it would be the same if he got hurt or killed going off because of Sasuke's wounds. But no way of being there with him physically. Sasuke settled for a prayer as they began their trek to the village. Stay safe, Naruto. On Hagakure, Makoto was still inside the compound, going over some papers when she felt someone coming. The pounding at the gate let her know the guest had arrived, and she quickly went to see what they could want at such a late hour. Her children were still not home, but she wasn't too concerned as they were most likely with one another wherever they were. Arriving at the gate, Makoto opened it to find a chunin heavily breathing from jumping around from place to place. It was his job to get the word out about the missing scroll and recruit ninja to help search for it. He had no idea about the missing Uchiha children and what he was in store for in the Uchiha compound. All he knew was the Hokage's order and that the Uchiha were quite capable ninja, from the ones that were left that was. Yes, what is it? Makoto didn't know the young man's name in particular, but stayed polite. It had to be urgent if they were coming at this odd hour. A slight moment of fear crept over her thinking of the children, but she brushed it aside. Uchiha-san, the Hokage has put out a general alert within the village. The scroll of sealing has been stolen, and we need help tracking down the one who took it. The guards along the wall have not said of anyone trying to escape, so we figure he's still within the village somewhere. Would you please help us search? Makoto was shocked that such an important artifact could be stolen right from under the Hokage, but knew the gravity of the situation. If those got out, it would make the world a lot more dangerous than it already was. Yes, I I will begin searching as soon as I get in proper dress. Please excuse me. The Chunin nodded and jumped off into the night to alert others, while Makoto headed back to her home to change. Her usual attire was of her apron with a shirt and pants underneath, nothing special. It had been a while since Makoto had worn her ninja gear, but this situation she felt required it. Besides, she was a jounin of the village, and should every once in a while remind herself and everyone else of the fact. Within her bedroom was where she kept her old ninja gear, where she had left it the day she retired to take care of Sasuke. Makoto undressed herself down to her black panties and quickly grabbed her black tank top, a tight sleeveless with the Uchiha fan on the back. Next she put on a standard jounin flak vest. It completely covered the top underneath, but let her cleavage breathe as she unzipped it a bit. Her pants were a standard affair, dark blue with a pair of sandals to complete the outfit. Any ninja tool she needed was already packed in her hip pouch, and Makoto was ready to go. She left the gate closed behind her as she began to jump across the village, searching for anything suspicious. In the back of her mind she was also keeping her eye out for Sasuke and Naruto. Those two weren't as disciplined as the older ninja, but they could still help search. Without much to go on, though, Makoto had no idea where to look or who she was looking for. Well, if I had to guess, they probably aren't in town anymore. The other jounin would have searched there already, and it would be too obvious. The scroll must be in the forest somewhere. Makoto stopped on a rooftop to take in her surroundings before she could move on. Around her, blurs in the night could be seen as shinobi desperately searched for the thief. Even in the darkness of Konoha, Makoto could make out the lavender eyes of Hyuga search parties, using their infamous Byakugan dot. But them on the search, it surely wouldn't take much longer, and once she saw the Ino Shikacho senior group running through the village, she realized how serious the situation was to everyone. No sense standing around. Makoto leaped off again in search of the culprit, but felt a certain amount of hopelessness in her search. What made her have any better chance of finding him than a Hyuga? The blast of wind made her hair whip back as an Anbu squad landed on the rooftop she was on. They ran past her to their next destination, not paying her too much mind. The squad leader just gave the clan head a courteous nod before she leaped off after her squad. Sorry Uchiha-sama. Were her parting words and startling Makoto when they arrived. She cursed herself, getting jumpy over something so simple. Makoto moved again, this time closer to the center of the city where the Hokage mansion was. Maybe the culprit had come back to survey their crime. That was what Fugaku had told her was one of the most common mistakes a criminal made. Instead of seeing a criminal though, she saw what she never wanted to see. Sasuke was on the back of a Chunin. She knew him as Iruka. He was their homeroom teacher and had just recently approved their graduation to genin. Well, this fact alone worried her. Even from the distance of a dozen buildings or so she could make out some cuts or wounds on her daughter. This made her act on reflex and move to check on herself as the mother. Sasuke Iruka touched down and saw an incoming figure. To his surprise, it was the girl's mother and head of the Uchiha clan. And she looked like she was about to kill something. Sasuke looked up from Iruka's shoulder to see who called her name. Instantaneously she was surprised to see her mother coming toward her. Iruka let her down and allowed the wounded girl to go to her mother's arms where she belonged. The Chunin smiled for a moment as the two met and embraced. That was one good ending to the night. Oh Sasuke, I thought the worst when I saw you on Iruka's back. Makoto rubbed her daughter's back and desperately held on, afraid she would lose her if she let go. Sasuke was glad her mother was concerned, but she was losing feeling in her body from her mother, squeezing along with pain from the wounds. Mother, if you keep squeezing me it might make these worse. Makoto realized she was speaking of her wounds and immediately backed off with a layer of concern touching her. Her eyes widened at the latest realization. Where is Naruto? Where is my son? Where is Naruto? Sasuke looked depressed for a moment and hesitated in answering, making Makoto's fears go wild in her mind. Iruka was quick to jump in. He pursued Mizuki, Makoto-sama. He is the thief of the scroll of sealing and the one who did this to your daughter. I wasn't able to stop him, so I decided to bring Sasuke back to the hospital and go after him once I was done. Makoto took a deep breath and processed the information. It was better than what she had first thought. Iruka, please go and bring Naruto to me. I know my children are ninja now, but we both know that there are opponents that they just can't handle. I almost lost Sasuke, and I don't want to lose Naruto over a scroll. Iruka nodded and took one last concerned look at Sasuke. The girl seemed to have trouble with her wounds still untreated. Makoto read his thoughts and allayed them. Don't worry, I will be taking my daughter to the hospital right after this. You can bring Naruto there when you get him, and then I will have a stern talk for both of you. She left the sentence on a hard note as she looked at Sasuke, who could only look to the ground in embarrassment. Iruka sent a sympathetic smile her way before leaping off the building toward the forest to find Naruto. It hadn't been too long since they had separated, so Iruka was hopeful that he could find them both in time. If he didn't, well, he didn't want to know how Makoto would react to such news. Naruto may not have been seen as an Uchiha by most of the populace, but Makoto acted like he was her flesh and blood. Makoto watched him leave before getting her daughter situated on her back, as it seemed her leg wasn't good enough to jump on anymore. "Hang on, Sasuke, we're going." The woman felt her daughter nod into her back as her arms looped around her neck. Makoto began to make her way to the hospital, albeit at a slower pace now. There were many questions she wanted to ask, but knew better than to make her daughter feel even worse. "What were you two doing before you decided to chase after Mizuki?" she suddenly asked, not so sure she herself knew why. Sasuke thought back to earlier